Kaustubh managed to escape the leopard, but not before it mangled his eye. It would be easy to dismiss what happened to him as a tragic accident. But these accidents happen all too often. The land of the tiger. India is home to a bewildering array of wildlife. But apart from animals, India is also home to 1 billion people. And as this human army expands, it takes more and more space, pushing out animals with devastating consequences.
ये जो टाइगर को जो अटैक करता है इसके कारण है।
माँ के गर्दन पे घाव के निशान थे, वाघ के यहाँ पर निशान थे।
शिकार के पास में अगर आदमी निकल गया तो आदमी के ऊपर अटैक करता है।
हाँ, घर तो भांगता है, वो लोग आदमी भी मार के चला जाता है।
रीछ जो है ना, आसूल, वो दोनों मेरे नजीक आ गए। मैंने बोला, अरे साला ये तो हमको खा डालेंगे। मैंने कुल्हाड़ी लिया और पकड़ा ऐसा, तो भागने लगे।
The elephants come back on the same route year after year, and one fine morning they find that there is a settlement on their way, and that leads to conflict.
Tragedies occur on both sides of the conflict. But as we give voice to our pain, it is all too easy to forget that we are not the only sufferers. Other lives have been lost. Other freedoms curtailed.
Well, we are facing this problem in many areas, particularly in the Project Tiger Reserve areas, as you know. We are also facing a man-animal conflict in elephants. We have a very large elephant population, over 25,000 elephants all across the country. So we are having man-animal conflict of a variety. So it exists at various levels. Some are threatening and some are not, not all that threatening.
Compared to human deaths, destruction of crops and livestock seem minor. But to those who suffer the daily depredations of ravening beasts, each cow lost, each field destroyed, traps them deeper in a cycle of poverty. And villagers protect their meager possessions with all they've got. The villagers have been successful at driving the elephants away, but at a high cost. For the women of Bucket Chapri, rebuilding houses has become just another chore.
পাঁচবাৰ আহি পেলাই হাতীয়ে ঘৰ ভাঙি পাঁচবাৰে ভাঙিছে গোটেই গাঁওখনে ভাঙি শেষ এদাই মহিম কৰি গৈছে আমি ইয়াৰ পৰা গৈ পেলাই একদম এই আখিবিয়াত আছোঁগৈ স্কুল ঘৰত এটা আছিলোঁ এটা ৰুমত 5 ঘৰ 6 ঘৰকা আছে মানুহৰ ওপৰত মানুহ উঠি আছে বুলি ক'লেও বেয়া নহয় 10 দিন আছোঁ
But our houses can be rebuilt. The jungles, however, cannot. Decimated by human greed, they offer little in the way of sustenance. And so elephants and other animals are forced to raid homes and fields for food.
हाथी खाता है तो खाता है, तोड़ता है तो तोड़ता है, आदमी लोग को भी मार देता है, मरा देता है.
અને રાતે હાચવા જવું પડે, કપાસ ખાઈ જાય, જુવાર ખાઈ જાય, तो आखिर रात जागीने रहવું પડે.
कम से कम हमारा 25-30-40 का नुकसान हो जाता है, 25-40 हज़ार.
But this conflict between man and beast is new. For centuries, it has been simmering.
Conflict has been there from Indus Valley civilization times, so it's not a new thing.
5,000-year-old seals bear evidence to this age-old conflict. a man trapped in a tree by a patient tiger waiting below. The ancient kingdom of Anga, which according to the Gajashastra was almost completely devastated by wild elephants. Yet there is evidence these animals weren't viewed as pests. The royal courts of the Mauryas and the Mughals maintained cheetahs. Blackbuck and elephants were worshipped, and the seal of Ashoka, now that of modern India, bears the head of 4 lions. But India today is changing.
Our tolerance has become less and less. We must understand very clearly that conflict will never go away.
Indeed, the conflict is increasing. Secure in our omnipotence, we replace the great jungles that once cloaked this land with a surging sea of humanity that maroons our wildlife. But not even we are exempt from the consequences of our callous destruction.
Over the last 4 years, we've seen the conflict gone up to very alarming levels, where we've lost almost 53 human beings.
अभी जैसा रान डुकर बोलो, एक डुकर से अभी बहुत डुकर हो गए.
हरण आवे से, रोजड़ा आवे से, भूंड आवे से.
पहले थे जानवर नहीं खाते थे, उतना प्रॉब्लम नहीं था.
আজি এনেকা উৎপাদ হাতী অহা গম পোৱা মই 4 বছৰে 4-5 বছৰে হৈছে আৰু তাৰ আগত নাছিলে।
अभी तो सांबर चितर सब जानवर खाने लगे।
ভোকেৰে শান্তিৰে খাবলৈ নাপাওঁ, শুবলৈ শান্তি নাপাওঁ।
But the price for the thoughtless war we wage against nature is not paid by us alone. The tigers of Sariska and Panna have been wiped out. Leopards, lions, bears, all critically endangered. Elephants slaughtered throughout their ranges. Blackbuck, nilgai, and other grazers labeled pests and chased away from fields, even as their forests get overrun with cattle. Eventually, the conflict spills over into urban India.
In fact, we have man-animal conflict in the case of monkeys as well. I mean, that's another example of a man. I face that every day in my office. We have a large population of monkeys.
Delhi's macaques terrorize locals, infiltrate government offices, and cause the death of the deputy mayor. And in Ahmedabad, langurs enter houses and wreak havoc. But other cities face much greater problems. Mumbai's unique city forest boasts the highest density of leopards in the world. Hemmed in on every side by the bustling metropolis, they've proven the ultimate survivors. Adapting their taste to dogs instead of deer, they spill out, stalking the slums. But when even the supply of dogs dries up, they turn to easier prey. Unlike Kaustubh, Anmol will never return from his games. Mere months after Anmol's attack, Mumbai went on high alert. 11 days, 12 attacks, 8 dead. Mumbaikars were outraged.
अरे दर दिन एक एक आते हैं, टाई सफारी फूट पहन के आते हैं, फोर इफ्तारी पीते हैं, बोलते हैं कल पिंजरा लग जाएगा, परसों लग जाएगा पिंजरा, और पिंजरा जहाँ लगा देंगे वहाँ कुत्ते को डाल देंगे। अभी तेंदुआ लोग पहले कोमड़ी और कुत्ता खाते थे, अभी इंसान को ऊपर वो खून लग गया, चाफ उनको।
और अब पहले के यहाँ गाय बकरी सब खाते थे, मुर्गी खाते थे, बिल्ली उल्ली, लेकिन अब बच्चे खाने लगे, अब बड़े खाने लगे। यहाँ पे सब बच्चे सब डर गए ना, बड़े छोटे सब डर गए एकदम।
आदमी अपने पैदा करने के लिए छोकरा या छोकरी के लिए आदमी क्या क्या नहीं कर डालता है, और ये आदमी की जिंदा खा रहे हैं, इनके लिए मारने प्रतिबंध है।
But Mumbai is not the only place leopards stalk. The dams that brought water and prosperity to Junnar were reaping a deadly harvest.
यहाँ पे जो लेपर्ड जंगल में पहले रहा करते थे तो उनको पानी मिलने के लिए कष्ट होता था, किल करना है उसके लिए भी लेपर्ड को काफ़ी डिस्टेंस से जाना पड़ता था। और एक बार यहाँ जब लोग लगाने लगे गन्ने का खेत तो जो लेपर्ड्स नीचे उतर आए तो उन्होंने सोचना शुरू किया कि भाई वहाँ वापस जाने में क्या मतलब है, यहाँ पीने के लिए जब चाहते हम पानी है भरपूर और छुपने के लिए जगह है, ब्रीडिंग के लिए प्राइवेसी है, और जब भूख लग गई तो थोड़ा सा स्टेप आउट करो, कुत्ता पकड़ लो, बकरी पकड़ लो। दूसरी बात ऐसे हुई कि लेपर्ड जो है ये साल में 2 बार डिलीवर करता है और जो जंगल की नेचुरल हार्श सिचुएशन है वहाँ पे फाइनल सर्वाइवर 1 या 0 रहता था, उसके जगह पे 3 या 4 सर्वाइव करने लगे यहाँ पे, इसलिए पॉपुलेशन बड़ी तेजी से बढ़ने लगी।
And so, Junnar developed its own population crisis of leopards in spite of not having any forests. A number of short-term solutions were tried out. People avoided going out at dusk and dawn when the animals are most active. They began to work their fields in groups to discourage attacks, and before the harvest, teams of foresters wearing protective gear attempted to scare away the leopards. The attacks abated, but never stopped. In the face of such fear, the forest department was forced to act, and the idea of trapping leopards from Junnar's fields and relocating them to forests was born. Before their release, the animals undergo a number of checks to ensure they are healthy.
Transponder microchip, which has a unique ID number, is now subcutaneously injected at the base of the tail.
The animals are carefully loaded. Mother and cub are on their way to freedom. The 2 leopards will travel nearly 800 kilometers from the fields of Junnar to the jungles of Tadoba, where they will see forests, perhaps for the very first time. Tension mounts at the release site. First, the cub is released. Now, for the mother. Unlike her cub, she zips away. After a large number of relocations, the attacks in Junnar and Mumbai came down. If attacks occur, animals are trapped to spend out their days in concrete bunkers. Relocation, however, has stopped, for transmitters indicated that relocated animals were trying to make their way back home.
What as biologists we learned earlier is an animal's behavior is changing over the last 20 years. It's adapting to trying to, adopt what is called a low risk, high gain strategy. So wherever it gets food at a very low risk, it will try to come out.
As jungles vanish and food becomes increasingly scarce, wildlife seems to be seeking out human habitat for what else is left. Heartbreakingly beautiful inside the forest, at close quarters, they can be terrifying.
We have realized as a species that food such as rice or wheat or whatever is far more nutritious. Why eat grass? You can grow this. Elephants have also realized this.
A new behavioral adaptation that might just spell their doom. Not only do the elephants raid fields, they are also known to attack houses for the food inside.
If you keep an elephant in one place and put a fence around it, it will eat itself out of the forest. So it has to move. As it moves, if you do not give it corridors of forest, connecting one forest and the other, it will create conflict.
Perhaps then, the fault lies with us, forcing animals to live in sanctuaries and parks when they are meant to roam free. When fields and tea estates venture to the very edge of the forest, who can blame them for straying?
They don't eat tea plants, but they do eat up some of the shade plants, the rehabilitation crops that are planted out. Of them, one is a favorite of elephants, that's the Guatemala grass. It's said that they come for the alcohol which is brewed over there, but I have seen they come for salt, they come for the rations that they have there lying in their houses.
But food is just one reason why elephants enter tea gardens.
Tea gardens are like little forests or sanctuaries for them, where they can spend their daytime. Evening is the time when they go and raid the fields, the crops.
With over half the population of Elephas maximus, the Asian elephant, India is critical to its survival. And with half of India's elephants, Assam and the northeast are frontiers in the battle to save it, and also front lines in the battle between man and elephant. After the paddy ripens, sleep is a distant memory. Rangers spend the night rushing to rescue villages.
এই ধূপটো জ্বলালে মানে আমি বেটে হাতী খেদিবলৈ যাম আৰু আমি হাতীক ভগৱান বুলি পূজা কৰোঁ, সেইকাৰণে যাতে আমাৰ জংঘলত একো অপকাৰ নহয় সেইটো কাৰণে আমি ধূপটো জ্বলাই প্ৰণাম কৰি জংঘলত সোমাই যাওঁ।
Lights keep the elephants at bay, as do loud noises. Large though they are, the elephants are quick and surprisingly quiet. They melt into the inky blackness of the night. The elephants have been outfoxed tonight. Tomorrow, they will return. For where else can they go? It was one such raid that led to Farhan's injuries. Bedridden, he ponders his fate.
तकलीफ तो होगा ही, लड़का बच्चा भी छोटा है। पहले ऐसे नहीं करता था हाथी, पहले आदमी लोग को डरता था, अभी आदमी को नहीं डरता है हाथी।
Houses and fields have come up on the elephant's traditional migratory routes, and as the forests decrease, elephant attacks increase.
This used to be a very important migratory path, especially for the wild elephants. What you see here today is what remains of a beautiful forest that used to exist even in the late 70s.
Robbed of their homes and their food, the elephants venture out with catastrophic consequences.
If an elephant dies, people will go and put flowers. It's Ganesh. Yeah? Even if the elephant has a damaged crop, even then they will go and put flowers. In this particular instance in 2003, when elephants were killed, people had gone and with chalk written on the dead bodies of the elephant, Dhan Chor, Bin Laden, Osama. So they were calling the elephant Osama. Now the transformation of an elephant from Ganesha to Osama is what worries me.
कुछ मानेगा बोल करके करता हूँ, उसको पूजा तो वो भी नहीं मानता, कैसा चीज है मानता ही नहीं है.
Parbati Barua is all too aware of the increasing anger towards elephants. India's only female mahout, she's seen firsthand the elephant's transformation from forest gods to crop-raiding thieves. She and her elephant, Lucky Mole, are living proof of a dying relationship. One that reminds us we need our elephant lords. With Lucky, she drives wild elephants from the fields, yet their sympathies lie squarely with the elephants.
हाथी का तो बॉर्डर मालूम नहीं है ना, ये पाक का बॉर्डर है, ये बागान का बॉर्डर है, ये वो चिंता नहीं करता है. हम अगर बांग्लादेशी घुस जाते हैं, हम भी इंटरनेशनल बॉर्डर को मानते नहीं है, तो वो तो एनिमल है.
Kunkis, or trained elephants like Lucky, play an important role in driving away wild elephants from fields. In the village of Brahmojan, WWF and the Forest Department have stationed elephants to protect paddy fields from their wild brethren. It's time for Joymati and Babu to enjoy a relaxing bath. And almost the entire village and all its children gather round. Proof of the sway these gentle giants hold over even those to whom elephants are a daily and not very welcome sight.
While dealing with the wild elephants, we have also realized that they evolve and they adapt to the human nature or the human barriers that we put up. Be it the case of the electric fencing. The electric fencing at times have been pulled down by elephants to cross over to paddy fields or to get into human habitations.
তেওঁলোকে যেতিয়া ইমানটো হেৰিডাল থাকিব, তাঁৰডাল এডাল থাকে, এই গুৰিটোত গছক মাৰি মানে এইটো ভাঙি এনেকৈ পেলাই দিয়ে, পেলাই দি তাৰ পাছতে দি পাৰ হৈ গুচি আহে. প্ৰায় হিন্দু ধৰ্মৰ মানুহবিলাকে মানে হাতীক ঈশ্বৰৰ প্ৰদত্ত বস্তু বুলি পেলাই ভাবে, আৰু সেইটো দৰে তেওঁলোকে আহোঁতে আহোঁতে হয়তো জানি যায়.
If you have a wound, you can put a band-aid, so you can put a fence, you can put a trench, you can move something. These are all immediate solutions because there's an animal in your backyard. What do? You have to do something. Yeah? But the long-term solution is you have to give it habitat. When I say habitat, I mean cover, I mean food, I mean water, I mean security.
In the arid regions of Saurashtra in Gujarat, habitat for black buck and nilgai are well provided within the Velavadar National Park. And the animals have responded with a population boom, spreading into surrounding fields. For fences cannot contain black buck or nilgai who simply jump them. And when they leave, danger beckons, but not from man. Ramu's mother was killed by a pack of dogs. Anywhere else, this would have been a death sentence for the young blackbuck calf. But here in Mahua, Ramu was installed in the local temple. His playmates are Nandi, an older Nilgai calf, and the temple's priests, with plenty of visits from villagers who worship him and Nandi. Their devotion has ensured that blackbuck and Nilgai roam the desertscapes of Gujarat, free from danger, becoming something of a pest.
અમારા ખેતરની અંદર લીલગાય આવે, ભૂંડ આવે, એનું નુકસાન બહુ થાય. 100% હોય એની માલમાં 50% ન રવા દે.
After dinner, these women's husbands head not to bed, but to the fields, guarding them against their gods. For every night, Nilgai and blackbuck enter their fields and eat their crops. But despite the destruction they cause, the villagers refuse to kill them.
મારવા તો આ 20 ગામમાં કોઈ તૈયાર નહીં થાય જનાવરને. લીલગાયનું આજ 2 વર્ષથી કીધું છે કે ગમે ત્યાં ભડાકા દઈ દો, પણ કોઈ આ ભાલના એરિયામાં કોઈ લીલગાયને મારવા તૈયાર નથી.
અરણને પહોંચા કરીએ અમારા કોળમાં પહોંચાય.
The villagers' devotion runs deep. Yet, even here, ceaseless destruction and lack of compensation is taking a toll.
સરકાર એનો કોઈ બંદોબસ્ત કરે, કોઈ દિવાલ છે અથવા કોઈ 8 ફૂટની જાળી છે અને અંદર ઘાસ ચારો અંદર લાખ્યા કરે ને અંદર રહે તો ખેડૂતને કોઈ ફાયદા થાય.
If in Gujarat people's faith is daily being tested, in Assam it seems to have disappeared. But it is in Maharashtra, near the Tadoba Andhari Tiger Reserve, that the most curious manifestations of faith occur.
लोगों के बीच में है कि अगर किसी जानवर को मार दिएगा तो बोलते हैं कि प्रसाद था, बाघ का प्रसाद था, बाघ ने उसको ले लिया.
Death at the hands of wild animals has always been a threat to the villagers of Tadoba. And so, they've developed a curious fatalism and deep knowledge of the animals they share their forests with.
भाली बोले तो वो बेकार प्राणी है, उसको यानी जानकारी नहीं है. वो अगर आदमी दिख गया तो भग गए तो भग जाती है, नहीं तो फिर एकदम आदमी के ऊपर दौड़ के आती है.
बिबट म्हणजे काय तो लाचारी माणूस आहे. तो बिबट म्हणजे असा हलकट आहे.
पागायला थांब म्हणून तो डटावल्या तर लय दूर राहील, पण आसवल नाही राहणार. ते काळकुळी एकदम अंगावरच येते.
वो जो वाइल्ड बोर है वो यानी वो ऐसा सीधा अगर दौड़ने लगे तो एकदम सीधा भाग जाते, आड़ा टेढ़ा नहीं भागता.
वाघ खतरा है, परंतु वाघ असा आहे ईमानदार आहे.
Boasting dense jungle cover, undulating hills and large lakes, the Tadoba Andhari Tiger Reserve is a haven for wildlife. Well connected to the forests of Pench and Kana, it is one of the last contiguous patches of forests left in the country. Once, leopards were relocated here from Mumbai and Junnar. Today, Tadoba has become a new front line in the man-animal conflict engulfing India.
This habitat has been under constant pressure for number of reasons. Of course, the grazing pressure, there is pressure for firewood collections. This habitat destruction by the outside people, there is a lot of this conflict between man and animal.
The people around Tadoba have always entered the forest to meet their needs. But thanks to a drastic increase in their numbers, human interference in the jungle has risen to unprecedented levels. Disturbed, the animals strike back.
म्हणजे नाही आता कोणचे आपलं कास्तकारीचं काम करे.
A simple errand, To find a missing cow can quickly go wrong.
आमची गाय जंगलात गेली, आली नाही म्हणून आलासाठी गेले पाहासाठी.
And all Manka Bai can do is wait, praying that her husband will return. And as villagers search for her husband, she sits, hoping that what they return to her are not his remains. Terrible as Manka Bai's losses, sometimes surviving a bear attack can be a curse. Vijay begins every morning with a heartbreaking task, helping his mauled father navigate his way around a house now unfamiliar. For 50 years, Budnaji has lived in this house, brought up his sons, but 4 years ago, everything changed.
सकाळी तरी 7-8 वाजता गेलो, इजोत गेलो. आता झाड करून होता एक आडवा, तर त्या झाडाच्या मेरेले ते जुडकुड होता, त्याची जसून होती खरं, ते तिकडून निघली तर तो माझ्यावर येऊन पडली. आता मी असं इकडं तोंड करून होतं, ते इकडे येऊन जंगली येते जखम हे येते कंगरेले येते वांडीले तोंड आले येते डोक्याला येते.
Sometimes death can be an easy way out, one that was denied to Buddhaji. If Mumbai and Junar have their leopards, Gujarat her Nilgai and blackbuck, and Assam has her elephants, Tadoba's burden are her tigers, leopards, boars and bears. But for every human life lost, countless animals have been slaughtered. And countless more will be.
There was a mob of probably more than 1,000 villagers, and there were these 2 cubs. The villagers were out to lynch them, throwing stones on them. It took almost 3 to 4 hours just to control the mob. We literally had to lift one of those cubs and put it in the cage. The other cub was rather aggressive. She kept charging at people. That process, the people kept, hitting her. And then these 2 cubs were shifted to Nagpur. But the condition did not look very good. In spite of very intensive efforts, 1 cub could not be saved.
And the other cub is doomed to a life in captivity, along with a companion whose mother too vanished.
This was one episode where the anger against the animal was so visible.
If people are angry with a tiger or an elephant, they have the ability to fall prey to the poaching gangs or trade gangs which roam around and tell them to notify them when the animal is nearby, and they'll go and poach it.
Once villagers view wildlife as a threat to their lives and livestock, poaching becomes rampant. Initially for revenge, but eventually for money. Routine patrolling by the forest department pays off. The poacher's trap is discovered before it can crush a tiger's paw.
Animal used to, it's totally immobilized, and he shouts or make halla gulla.
the department's work has just begun. Traps mean poaching gangs, and they are not easily discouraged. Over the next few days, vigilance will be increased. Forest officers will continuously check beach stations and villages to see if there are reports of strangers who will be encouraged to leave. While patrolling remains critical, equally important is sensitizing villagers.
तुम्ही समजा ढोरं घेऊन गेले आणि तिकडे बसले तर त्याला असं नाही वाटत की बाबा आज माणूस दिसला आणि अटॅक करू. त्याला असं वाटतंय की जनावर आहे कोणीतरी.
NGOs and forest departments teach villagers to protect themselves.
काडीवाडी घ्यायला ते एकटे नका जाऊ आणि मुलांना नका पाठवू आणि थोडी आवाज करा कारण समजा वाघ आहे तिकडे तर त्याला माहिती पडतं की कोणी येत आहे.
Efforts to mitigate this deadly conflict carry on. Yet, it can be like treating symptoms while the underlying disease festers. As long as humans living on the edges of forests remain in abject poverty, they will enter the jungle for fodder and fuel. As long as our forests remain fragmented, animals will come to the fringes in search of food and water. The answer then is not just increased protection, but a rethinking of how we manage forests outside the national park system.
In our country, over 200 million people depend on their livelihoods on forests. And we cannot create inviolate forest areas in the wilderness, because you'll always have local communities dependent on their livelihoods.
You need to give it corridors to move between habitats. You can't imprison. Even if you give a beautiful home, if you're told not to get out of your home, there's a problem. So you need to allow people, in this case animals, to move from one habitat to another, especially migratory species. Not every animal needs it, but migratory species need to move.
As long as people and animals are forced to compete for the same resources, the same spaces, conflict is inevitable.
We are trying to create dedicated corridors which enable elephants to move in search of water and habitats without creating tensions with local communities.
But even the darkest hour is a harbinger of dawn. We've realized protecting sanctuaries isn't enough. Animals need to migrate free from human interference. Villagers must be freed from their dependence on the jungle. The cost of inaction is mass extinction.